Klay Thompson is a Dallas Maverick, and I think it's going to be a great fit. I mean, this is coming from somebody who's always believed in Klay Thompson and always thought he's a great player and someone who would fit in great on the Dallas Mavericks. Will Klay Thompson in Dallas work? Let's just cut the shit and get right to the point. All right, first and foremost, you have to ask yourself the question, is Klay Thompson still a good basketball player? The last time we saw him on an NBA court, he dropped 0 points in an 0 of 10 shooting performance against the Sacramento Kings in the play-in tournament. That is the last memory we have of him as a Golden State Warrior. Think about how sad that is. It is obvious that Klay Thompson has taken a step back as a player, especially as he's aged and had to deal with some pretty catastrophic leg injuries. For Klay Thompson, last year's points per game total was the lowest it's been since his second year in the league. It was his second worst shooting season from a three-point percentage standpoint, and yet he still averaged nearly 18 points per game on 39% from three. So while it's not the Klay Thompson that made the Splash Brothers, it's still a very, very solid basketball player. A basketball player that I was surprised I put him in my top 100 list at the end of the season. This was before I even thought he would be potentially a member of the Dallas Mavericks. And a deeper dive into the season for Klay Thompson last year shows that there's still quite a bit left in the tank for him, at least on the offensive end of things. He shot 35% from three in November, but from that point forward, nearly 40% from three on 9.5 attempts per game over the last 60 games of the year for Klay. And his play to end the season for the Warriors is a big reason they secured a play-in spot. Of course, he ended up shitting all over the court in that play-in game, and a big reason why they were making a real solid, legitimate push for an actual playoff seed at the end of the season. The Warriors went 10-2 over the last 12 games to secure a play-in spot. Klay played in 10 of those games, and he averaged 22 points per game on 41% from three on 10 attempts per game over that stretch, doing the Klay Thompson stuff that we know and love. And although it ended poorly for Klay, the Warriors are in real serious danger of missing the play-in tournament entirely if Klay Thompson does not go on that stretch that he went on. So yes, Klay Thompson is still a good basketball player, but how exactly can he help the Dallas Mavericks? Mavs GM Nico Harrison came out and said the Mavs were a Klay Thompson away from winning the NBA Finals, from beating the Boston Celtics. You remember that series? I tried to forget it as much as possible because the Mavericks got the absolute shit kicked out of them. Do I agree with Nico Harrison's assessment here? No, I don't. I don't at all. But him saying that gives us a little view into the thinking of the Mavericks front office here. Because when we think of the Luka Doncic era in Dallas, we think offense. We think Luka being this great offensive engine, they're going to generate a ton of threes, they're going to shoot a lot of threes, and they're going to try to score a lot of points. That's what the Mavericks have been throughout the entirety of Luka's career so far. 41% of their shots last season were threes. That was the second most in the NBA, trailing only the Boston Celtics. But those numbers are a little bit misleading because that is not who the Dallas Mavericks were after the trade deadline last year. They dropped to 6th in three-point frequency after the trade deadline and all the way down to 15th in three-point accuracy, shooting only 36% from three. That is the same number they shot in the postseason. And this struggle to, one, generate threes, and two, convert on threes really reared its ugly head in the finals against the Celtics. The Mavs shot 31% from three in that series, and they attempted 11 less threes per game. They were 28% on open threes in that series, 31% on wide open threes. Just for a frame of reference, the Celtics were 43% on wide open threes, and that's just a huge, massive swing right there. And Klay Thompson last season, even though it was a down year for him shooting-wise, shot 39% on open threes. That would have been the best number on the Dallas Mavericks roster, and 38% on 7 catch-and-shoot three attempts per game last year. So you can kind of see where Nico Harrison is coming from. The reality is the Mavericks have not paired a shooter like this next to Luka Doncic at all in his career. You can make the argument that Kyrie Irving is a guy like that, but Kyrie Irving is more of an on-ball offensive creator. He does shoot catch-and-shoot threes. He does shoot threes generated by Luka Doncic, but that's not the majority of his shot diet. That is the majority of Klay Thompson's shot diet. He shot 9 threes per game last year. Luka has never had a teammate that has attempted over 8 threes per game. And Klay Thompson is still very, very capable of catching fire and burning an entire gym down. He had 25 games last season where he made 5 or more threes. The Warriors were 16-9 in those games. The Mavs, as a team, had 25 games total where somebody not named Luka Doncic or Kyrie Irving made 5 or more threes. He scored 25 or more points 16 times last year. The Mavs only had 13 occurrences where somebody not named Luka Doncic or Kyrie Irving scored that amount, just on their whole entire roster. So Klay Thompson does have this microwave scoring effect that the Mavs haven't really had next to Luka and Kyrie Irving. Now, you could say that was Tim Hardaway Jr., but and that's not really fair to Tim Hardaway Jr. because he did have a bit of a microwave scorer effect to him, but it was very inconsistent. That's not to say Klay's not inconsistent, because he is inconsistent. He had 12 games last year where he shot 30% or worse from the field. The Warriors were 4-8 in those games. He had 26 games where he shot 30% or worse from three. The Warriors were 10-16 in those games. So the Warriors, as they were constructed last year, weren't really built to survive Klay Thompson's stinkers, and I think that's why some of his struggles were amplified a little bit. Meanwhile, the Mavericks, on the other hand, they are built to survive Klay Thompson's stinkers. How do I know this? Because they've survived Tim Hardaway Jr. stinkers for years now. When Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving are handling the primary scoring load, less is going to be asked of Klay Thompson, and he can take a lesser role where he's asked to shoot catch-and-shoot threes, corner threes, and hopefully threes where he's coming off of screens. This is going to be a big challenge for the Dallas Mavericks, and if they want to maximize the Klay Thompson experience in Dallas, they have to get creative with how they use him offensively. Because yes, just having him on the floor is going to work wonders for you spacing-wise. You could certainly see a pathway for the Dallas Mavericks to have the best offense in the NBA next season with Luka and Kyrie Irving, two legitimately good shooters next to him, and Klay Thompson, a great shooter, PJ Washington, a better shooter than his numbers would indicate, and a legit incredible rim-running, vertical spacing threat in Derek Lively and Daniel Gafford. But again, the Mavericks are going to have to get creative. Klay Thompson had 5.5 possessions per game last year where he was coming off of a screen. That was by far the most in the NBA. Just for a frame of reference, the Utah Jazz were the only team in the league who averaged that many possessions per game off of screens. Klay shot 42% off screens last year, 1.1 points per possession. That is his best number since the 2017-2018 season. And that's not really something the Mavs have ever done. The Mavs as a team averaged 3.5 possessions per game off screens last year, and they were second worst in efficiency. Now, a lot of that is personnel related. The Mavs don't really have a lot of great movement shooters, but they're going to have to make it work with Klay Thompson because you're not maximizing his potential. You're not maximizing his skill set if you don't do that. There is some on-ball creation stuff with Klay Thompson. I would say he's much more capable as an on-ball creator than Tim Hardaway Jr. was or Derek Jones Jr. was. And I have to say, the numbers sort of surprise me a little bit here. Like my eye test tells me Klay is a terrible isolation player just because I think his misses are really bad, and his misses, you just think to yourself, what the fuck are you doing shooting that? And while the volume is pretty small, he did average 1 point per possession in isolation last year, which puts him in the 67th percentile. And if you look at the other Dallas Mavericks who had enough isolation possessions to qualify for this, Dante Exum was the only guy last year who's not named Luka Doncic or Kyrie Irving to be more efficient than that. Dante Exum. And I was just looking back through Klay's career. He's really never been terrible in isolation. The worst number in his career was in 2015, 2016 when he averaged 0.8 points per possession in isolation. That number kind of shocked me because I always kind of thought Klay was an inefficient isolation player just because the misses burn deep inside of my brain. And while I don't think he's going to take the mantle of being this third scorer who's going to break guys down off the dribble next to Luka and Kyrie, there is something there that at least makes you perk up a little bit. Now, my big question is, how is Klay Thompson going to fit into the starting lineup defensively? There's a lot of talk, well, Klay's replacing Tim Hardaway Jr., Klay's shooting replacing Tim Hardaway Jr., and I guess I see where people are coming from when they say that, but the reality is Klay's replacing Derek Jones Jr. That's who the replacement is. Derek Jones Jr. was the starting small forward during the Mavericks finals run. That is what Klay Thompson will be this upcoming season, at least presumably. And I do have my concerns because Derek Jones Jr. was the guy who, more often than not, picked up the most difficult defensive assignment last year for the Dallas Mavericks, and he was incredible at that. But I will say, the Mavericks defense excelled last year post-trade deadline because they just got more size and they focused on team defense. If you look at the numbers here, the Mavs defense was slightly better when Derek Jones Jr. was on the court versus when he was off. But it wasn't until PJ Washington entered the fold at the trade deadline that those two combined to make a ferocious wing tandem defensively. When Derek Jones Jr. and PJ Washington were on the court together, they had a 103 defensive rating, which is absolutely elite. You look at all these other pairings when one guy's off, one guy's on, one guy's off, one guy's on, and you could just tell that it was the combination of those two that really made the Dallas Mavericks defense thrive. So if Klay Thompson buys into the team defense scheme that the Mavericks have, I don't think they'll take too big of a step back defensively, but it is something that I worry about. The Golden State Warriors defense was 4 points per 100 possessions better last year when he was off the court. According to EPM, Klay Thompson has had his worst defensive season since 2016. And given his age and injury track record, I doubt that he's just going to magically improve overnight defensively. But he's better than Tim Hardaway Jr. I mean, I could say that with real comfortability. The more I think about this signing, the more I like it for everybody involved here. I think it's really nice for Luka and Kyrie and the rest of the Mavericks to have a real legitimate floor spacer like this that can help open up the floor a little bit so those two can operate. And I think for Klay Thompson, it is an incredible fit to play next to a playmaker with the capabilities of Luka, somebody who generates more corner threes than anybody in the NBA. Playing alongside Kyrie Irving, who's also a very capable playmaker, playing alongside a guy like Derek Lively, which it might sound stupid talking about a second-year center like this, but having Klay Thompson space the floor is going to make life so much easier for Derek Lively, who's now operating in the short roll with an elite kickout option. So do the Dallas Mavericks beat the Boston Celtics with Klay Thompson in the lineup instead of a Derek Jones Jr.? Probably not. I mean, the Celtics really spanked them. They spanked them good. But going back and rewatching bits of that series, man, it was so obvious how the lack of shooting really caught up to the Mavericks and how the Celtics just felt comfortable helping off of guys and forcing questionable shooters to hit shots, and they just couldn't do it. They were great all postseason long, but it was the finals where it really stuck out. Another thing that makes me excited about this is the Mavericks do have versatility here. You know, they're not paying Klay Thompson $30 million. If it doesn't work out, or if there's situations where it makes more sense to have Najee Marshall on the court or Quentin Grimes on the court for defensive purposes, they can do that. I think this also helps when you stagger Luka and Kyrie's minutes, because if you have Klay Thompson on the court next to Luka with no Kyrie, that's still going to make Luka's life easier. It'll make Kyrie Irving's life easier because they have a real legitimate floor spacer playing alongside of him. This is a great signing for both sides. The more you look into it, it's a perfect fit. Klay fits like a glove on this team. There are some questions, there are some concerns, but ultimately I think this was a home run signing, and I can't wait to see how it all plays out.